We start out as colonists. We start out with a king and a parliament that wants money from us. What else do governments want besides power and money? And our children. The parliament enacts the Stamp Act, and the Stamp Act requires that every piece of paper in your possession, every book, every deed, every mortgage, every lease, every poster you're going to nail to a tree has to have a stamp on it. You had to go to a British government office in the colonies and buy the king's stamp. Question: how did the king know if every piece of paper in your possession had the king's image on it? Answer: the Parliament enacted the Writs of Assistance Act. What the heck did that do? That let British soldiers write their own search warrants. It authorized them to authorize themselves to enter any home, any building, any dwelling, ostensibly for the purpose of looking for the stamps. Of course, while they were there, they frequently helped themselves to what they wanted, including the home itself. Back to the litany of rights. The most unique American right, after the right to life, is the right to be left alone. Thus, the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution says the government can't write its own search warrants, can't knock on your door, can't break it down, can't arrest you, can't take your property, can't look at your personal papers, effects, or things, unless they present real evidence of real crime to a judge. So the Constitution puts a neutral judge between the government and the government's target. No matter how guilty is the target, no matter how threatening is the target, no matter how feared is the target, no matter how widespread is the belief in the guilt of the target, any government and every government that wants to get to that target must first go to a judge and present evidence of probable cause. That's what the law used to be. Until a president from the Lone Star State persuaded the supposedly freedom-loving Republican Party that it could do away with the Fourth Amendment. Remember the Writs of Assistance Act? We fought against a king when his soldiers knocked on our doors with self-written search warrants. The most abominable piece of legislation since the Alien and Sedition Acts, which made it a crime to criticize everybody in the government but the vice president, because the vice president was Thomas Jefferson, who welcomed their criticism. But the most abominable piece of contemporary legislation is the Patriot Act. You think that the Fourth Amendment protects you? Look again, the Patriot Act lets federal agents write their own search warrants. And the Patriot Act makes it a felony for the recipient of those search warrants to tell anyone. Let me get this straight. What part of Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech? What part of the people shall be secure in their persons, places, houses, and things does the Congress not understand? That's right. Yeah. The Bush administration prosecuted an 86-year-old librarian because an FBI served her with a self-written search warrant to find out who had borrowed books from a public library, and she told her 74-year-old assistant. So they prosecuted her for speaking. They have made it a crime to tell the truth. Question in an open courtroom to the 86-year-old lady under oath: did you receive a self-written search warrant? If she answers yes and tells the truth, she goes to jail for 5 years for speaking the truth. That's the nature, the insidious nature the damnable nature of this piece of legislation that the Congress has imposed on us, and which regrettably, my dear friends, is still the law today. None of them read it. I spoke to a group of members of Congress in another state, not far from here. I don't even want to tell you who it is. And some of them came up to me afterwards and said, well, we voted for this thing, but we didn't know that it let federal agents write their own search warrants or that it made a crime for people to tell anyone. So I asked the question that you all know the answer to. Did you read it? No, of course not. In the case of the Patriot Act, they actually have an excuse for not reading it, because the Republican leadership in the House took this 315-page piece of legislation, which I have read 3 times and which takes 20 hours to read, and put it on the House intranet, the internal internet for House members and their senior staff, for 15 minutes before it was time to vote. And the Attorney General told the House of Representatives there's a terrorist behind every bed bug and under every tree and next to every toilet, and we have to can't worry about these fine points of the Constitution. We need these powers to go after these people now. There have been 6 prosecutions under the Patriot Act. 3 have been for pornography, 2 have been for corruption, and 1 was the old librarian from Bridgeport. Has any of that made you safe? Of course not. But it has made you less free. Yes. Occasionally, there are some of my former colleagues who wear black robes who have done the right thing. When the Bush administration said we can take people to Cuba because we don't have to obey the Constitution or the treaties or the laws, we can torture them, and best of all, we don't have to worry about those pesky federal judges, the Supreme Court by a vote of 8-1 said you can't. When the Congress enacted legislation that said if the president declares you an enemy combatant, you don't have the right to habeas corpus, meaning you can't force the government to come before a neutral judge and justify its unlawful confinement of you, and the Supreme Court by a vote of 5-4 said you can't. When the president said he could lock up Americans and throw away the key because they were too dangerous to talk to their parents, their spouses, their lawyers, or other prisoners, that he could keep them in jail for as long as he wanted without even charging them with a crime. By a vote of 6-3, the Supreme Court said, you can't. In fact, every single time that people took the Bush administration to the Supreme Court over its so-called war on terror, the government lost and freedom won. I remember having a debate with one of my more irritable colleagues, and he said to me, what is your problem with this Patriot Act, and what's your problem with Gitmo? And I looked at him and I said, you like all this stuff. Bush was president at the time. You like all this stuff because you trust the president. What happens when these powers are passed on to a president that you don't trust? And he looked at me and he said, well, when I am sent to Gitmo, will you come to visit me? And I said, Bill? No. And of course we know that Abraham Lincoln slaughtered 600,000 Americans. His troops raped women, robbed banks, destroyed courthouses, burnt towns, and they all got away with it. All in the name of big government, of order, of safety. I hear the devil coming from around a tree. And the devil stopped to talk to me. And the devil said, give me your liberty and I'll keep you safe. Don't ever let anyone make that diabolic bargain in your behalf.